Make the choice to begin anywhere in your life, and the journey has started. And along the way, be inspired. Listen to the stories by joining the president of Howard University, Dr. Wayne A.I. Frederick, on The Journey.
The student experience is among our top priorities here at Howard University. And keeping our student body engaged is fundamental to our mission of continually pushing Howard forward. This episode's guest has been a vital member of our outreach and engagement efforts, and I'm excited to discuss those efforts in more detail with her. Hello, my name is Dr. Wayne Frederick, and my guest today on The Journey is Dr. Kelechi Fluitt, Executive Director of Student Outreach and Engagement for Howard University. So welcome.
Thank you.
I kind of feel like we meet again,
Right.
to say the least. So tell me a little bit, as a fellow Howard alum, what brought you to Howard?
Wow. So I'm a first-generation American. My parents are Nigerian, or I am Nigerian, but I was born right here in Washington, D.C., so I'm technically also a native Washingtonian. As a native Washingtonian, I decided to go away for college, but ultimately came back for my PhD, and have loved it and have stayed ever since.
You know, I'm always impressed when I meet students from Nigeria, and I would say in general the African continent. When I make rounds with students in the med school, I say to them, where are you from? And they tell me from Nigeria. And I say, where were you born? And they say, Baltimore. And I say, well, it sounds like you're from Baltimore. And I say that to say that that connection of the heritage is very inspiring. So with that in mind, what about your childhood that you think your parents' background played a role in terms of directing you along the academic lines that you took?
I think a huge part of who I am is because of my culture. My parents were really intentional about teaching us the importance of education. So it wasn't a choice. It was rather like, this is what you do. And so you go to school, you go to college, you get a good degree, you go work. But education was a huge part of our lives growing up. I think also culturally, my mom was really intentional about reminding us of our culture. We ate cultural foods. We went to cultural events. We speak the language. We're really connected. And I think that's also a driving force for me today.
Understood. So while at Howard, you obviously had a great experience in terms of student engagement. Tell me a bit about your undergrad experience and your academic experiences, at least at the university level, prior to coming to Howard.
Yeah, so I actually want to go a little bit back. I want to acknowledge that I was a part of the Howard University Upward Bound program while here, and I think that also really solidified my connection to Howard, even though I wasn't a student. I thought in the 9th grade I was a student because we lived here, we stayed on campus through the summer. So I did my undergraduate degree at Winston-Salem State University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So went away and did my master's at Bowie State, so not too far, and then came back with my PhD. Initially, I wasn't going to get my PhD, but had a really good professor who was a Howard alum that said, I think that you have what it takes to go all the way. Literally, that was his words. And he said, go, and I did.
That's great. Were you involved in student government or any kind of leadership at Winston-Salem and at Bowie?
Absolutely. So I got involved in everything. Started out in the university choir, then I was on the Marlin troupe, but ultimately I was fortunate to serve as Miss Winston-Salem State University, 2004, 2005. Being a university queen, especially in the South, is a really big deal. So I had the opportunity to serve my institution both on the local and the national level. And then forging on to Bowie State, served transition to student government, where I served as the president of the Graduate Student Council and did that for 2 terms. And then here at Howard, I came in and served in the graduate school at the Graduate Student Council as a treasurer, and then became a 2-term president, went on to do graduate student assembly coordinator, and then ultimately graduate trustee on the board of trustees.
Excellent. So let's start there, because that's kind of where I met you.
Yes.
And I became instantly impressed with your focus. What about that experience you appreciated, and took from, and probably was surprising to you that you didn't expect?
I think one of the things I appreciate about historically Black colleges, and especially Howard, is our ability to really support one another through advocacy. And so really being able to be a voice for my colleagues felt natural to me. People would naturally ask me questions, wanted to be connected to resources, had questions about the institution. And it just felt like a natural fit to kind of support them. And then people encouraged me to serve. I was already serving, but was like, I think you will be great at this. And I tried my hand at it, and I was really committed to it. And I think it worked, and I'm still doing it now.
Excellent. And I guess being in a student leadership role, as you think of what you do now, what about those student leadership roles you had, you think informs when you think of outreach and engagement for students? What about it you think is informative today?
I think on a basic level, it's community. I think in order for one to thrive anywhere, they need to be connected to the community. And I think sometimes that's what students are lacking. They don't feel a connection to wherever it is that they are. And so when you're thinking about outreach and engagement, you first have to find your community, your group of friends, whether it's one or two, whether they're from your state or not, whether or not you connect because you're intramurals or you ate in the cafe at the same time or you're in the same major. So once they find community, they're able to engage in activities on campus, to show up, not just to your social activities, but to, a debate, to an arts gallery, to an art presentation in fine arts. And they're able to have a more diverse experience. So I think community is really essential. I also think connectivity, so not only to the institution, but to the place that surrounds us, is also something that helps to kind of guide both leadership, but also engagement and outreach.
Excellent. So before we get there, your doctoral degree is in counseling psychology, and you spent some time in our counseling services. There's a lot of conversation today in higher ed about the need for counseling services, about mental health, wellness on campuses. What was your experience like in that area of the university?
I think one of the biggest things that I tried to do as a clinician at the University Counseling Service was just to let students be aware that there was a resource available to them. There were several times I would go to conversations and people were like, oh, I didn't know we had a counseling service. They may have been people that graduated and was like, oh, I wasn't aware that this was available to me. So that was the biggest thing. One, to make them aware that Howard was really intentional about having this resource available to them. And then the second thing was to kind of break down the stigma of mental health. The assumption really is that you have to be on one spectrum or the other, but really just encouraging people that you can have adjustment concerns. You came from Texas, you came from Nigeria, and you're trying to navigate DC, you're trying to navigate Howard, and that may be causing you some social anxiety. You may have relationship distress. You may have roommate issues. So it's not one thing where you have to go to therapy because you're in this dire space, but rather you're navigating everyday life challenges and you need someone to hold your hand along the way. So just really trying to be a resource for students.
Yeah, as I think about that, and probably just to take that a little, a bit further, as you see on our campus in particular, when you look at primarily African-American students or predominantly African-American students, is there something unique or different about what they're experiencing that may be adding more stress and more pressures on their mental health?
Yes, I definitely think that one of the biggest things is just navigating what it means to suffer from mental illness and or what it means to have mental illness. I think coming from certain cultural backgrounds, there's a stigma there. And so people don't always feel comfortable saying, I need help. And so really just encouraging people to do that. I also think that navigating institutions of higher learning is difficult enough. We have our fair share of first-generation students, meaning they have nobody in their family that's ever navigated a path to college. And so while other people may call auntie or uncle or dad or mom, they are the first in their family. And so helping them navigate that comes with its own unique stressors. We're mindful that we have students that support families, both locally and internationally. So they're working, but they're sending money back and they're navigating. And so that has its own unique stressors. I'm also mindful of the racial climate and its impact on our students, especially young Black and brown people navigating the world today. It can be a very scary place. And so that also has its own impact on their mental health.
Now, in terms of resources,
Yes.
It does require a lot of resources. As a university president, this is always a challenge for me. How do we dedicate the right amount of resources, not enough, but just the right amount of resources to what is a growing need and also something that, quite frankly, has been under-resourced for quite some time.
Absolutely.
What is your sense of that resource allocation that's necessary for that investment in mental health, in the whole gamut of it, counseling being one part, but sometimes there's a need for acute interventions and other aspects of that clinical care?
I think one of the things that came out of the COVID-19 pandemic was just a reminder about emotional and mental wellness. I don't think that we can highlight it enough. And so, of course, to your point, I definitely think that's an area that always needs resources. It's hard, right? Because we can't always tell which way the pendulum will swing, right? But we do know that in addition to physical wellness spaces or even spiritual and religious wellness spaces, there needs to be a space to hold one's emotional wellness. And dare I say, there needs to be more resources allocated to that because it's needed. I think that there are so many unique ways that we can address that. And I do think that the University Counseling Service is doing the best job to manage all of the needs, the growing needs that we're seeing, not just at Howard, but across the globe.
Right. So to make a pivot, now you're taking those experiences into this new role. Never had this role before.
No.
A lot of it is undefined. You're kind of making it up as you go along, but there's a need. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. So define that outreach and engagement for our listeners. What exactly do you hope to achieve, to see, to navigate in this role?
I think my ultimate hope is that students will see Mecca as their home, that they will see Howard University as the place that not only feeds them academically, but nurtures their soul, their body, their mind, and their emotional wellness. I think one of the biggest things that I hope to create is community. And so I have my door open, students come in, they sit down on the floor, they sit in the chairs, they sit everywhere, and I only have 2 chairs, and so I'm really excited about that. They feel comfortable in my space. They feel open enough to ask the questions that they need to. And so engagement to me is connectivity, it is community. So not only encouraging them to find new ways to engage through the campus, but also making sure they're aware of the ways to connect through campus. Because sometimes it's not the who, but it's the how. Like, okay, I'm not aware that this is happening, or how do I get connected with this office, this organization, this entity? And so saying, these are the ways that you can do that. And then outreach, I'm always on the yard. I try to go to as many things as I can, just so people are aware that I am, one, a resource. And even if Dr. Fluitt doesn't have the answers, she would do her very best to get you the responses. It's important to me to be responsive via email, to be responsive via phone, because I recognize the frustration that could come along when you feel like you are trying to communicate and no one is responding. So they're just little things that I'm trying to be intentional about, and so far the students seem to really appreciate it.
And it's great that they come to you, and I'm gonna ask you to elaborate on what are the typical things they're coming to you about. But I also want to touch on the fact that you see yourself going to them. Yes. Where are you meeting them?
I was intentional about working with our bosses here, our senior leadership here at Howard, to be placed in the Blackburn Center, because that's the heartbeat of the campus. I can't think of someone being in student engagement and outreach and not being at the hub. Mm-hmm. So I'm right at the end of what we used to call Power Hall, right? But right there amongst the students. So literally I could be on a Teams meeting and you'll hear uproar. 2 days ago, there was Mary next door and I didn't even know, right? So that's really great. But then I also go out. So I try to go to different buildings. I've been to the graduate school. I try to do virtual events. So hybrid, I'm open to all and all of it, because I recognize that the students the hub is the Blackburn, but they're outside on the yard, especially now the weather is beautiful. They're out there and it's just beautiful to see. They're down in the valley. They're, up everywhere. They're just taking up space, and I love it. So I try to be anywhere that they are.
And that's great that you meet them where they are. So Absolutely. Tell me, typically, they come and sit in your office. What are some of the things or the topics that they are coming to you about?
First week on the job was registration. Like, I'm trying to register for this class. I need a pen. I need to get to this person. Okay, so I'm reaching out to Lincoln Brown and just other campus resources and connecting them. And then like, Dr. Fluitt at work, thank you, Next thing is just curiosity about who I am. Like this office there wasn't anybody in this office. Oh, this is nice. Or, they come in here and they try to sit. I've gotten a lot of freshmen who are just new. Right. And just want to kind of get to know what Howard is and my Howard experience. I have actually got a really good influx of graduate students who I'm encouraging to go beyond the books and to expand their Howard experience outside of just the academic realm, because I think it could provide them with a richer experience. Sometimes the assumption is that Howard is just for undergrads, but my graduate experience, I get chills. It was mind-boggling. The exposure that I got, the experience that I got, the memories that I hold. And I think that learning happens, and we believe that learning happens in and outside of the classroom. So really being intentional about that.
Yeah, I always talk to new students at Howard about the fact that, we are very intentional about the 10 to 20% of the time you're going to spend in the classroom, but the magic occurs outside, right? When you get to test what you're learning and your own theories about it in your conversations with other people, and that certainly doesn't happen just in the classroom. I guess the other thing that I'm curious about as you think of that engagement, and I'm happy that you mentioned how many freshmen come to you, because the other thing is sometimes this campus can be daunting. There are people from, at any given time, over 60-something countries, almost every state is represented. And they have to find themselves. So I'll give you an example. Week of moving, I met a black Muslim family from Seattle who they were looking for the prayer room, and then I saw this student after, guiding them. I saw this student maybe 4 weeks later, and he ran up to me and said, oh, I found the prayer room, was great. I go over there all the time. And I think of now during Ramadan, trying to make sure that we're accommodating. So my point is that we really cover the spectrum. Absolutely. And so engagement is going to look very different. What types of programming or resources are you trying to put in place to ensure that everybody, even in the singular nature of what they may be bringing or want to experience, is still having a fulfilling experience?
So one of the things I kicked off was a bison listening session, and it really was for the campus population to come in and meet me, but also for them to tell me what may be not only their challenges, but also what's working well. I think we don't always get what's working well. We always get what's happening. So how is your Howard experience going? What's working well? And then transition into what are our opportunities, right? And sometimes it's just easy. Like, oh, I would suggest this. That's an easy fix. We can get that done. So the Bison listening sessions were really helpful. It was a 45-minute to an hour session with Q&A. And I would do it in a reading lounge. I've done it virtually. I did it over with Mr. Brown in his space with retention, and that was helpful. Another thing we kicked off was a space for first-generation students. So we had a mix and mingle in February with first-gen students where they met other people that were also first-gen and started to build community. Couple left as friends, like they lived in the same halls, same dorms, same everything, but they had never met. And so that was really exciting. But I think the bigger thing was the engagement beyond February. So as they were leaving, we were like, okay, we're gonna meet again in March. And they're like, oh, this is not just a one-off. And I'm like, no, we're gonna meet every month until graduation. Once a month, and we're going to talk about everything. So in April, we talked about schoolwork balance. They had a lot of questions about exactly what you said, navigating all of the opportunities, because it's just so much, and how do they choose, and and mom is calling, and classes are calling, and all these other activities that they want to be a part of, how do they navigate it? And then the one we're doing, that was in March, I'm sorry. So February was the big stir, March was schoolwork and balance, and April is going to be a vision board for them to think about who they want to be at the end of their bison journey, and for us to start to work towards that. And then I'm really excited because in 2 weeks today, April 26th, we're going to have a wellness day for the campus, for the entire campus. So faculty, staff, students, we're gonna have everything from a 360 booth to massages, to food trucks, to Rita's, inflatables. It's just gonna be filled from Founders Library to Chadwick Boseman with diverse self-care and wellness activities that, for me, we're really intentional about that deal with the 5 senses. So touch, smell, taste, sound, hearing, everything. So I'm excited about that.
I love that. And it probably just to expand on that, A few years back, in my role as president, I was very concerned about the health and wellness of the campus, and so we had a health fair, which was more, programmed around the clinical types of screening and investigation, everything from diabetes, to hypertension checks, etc. And I was really, really overwhelmed when we found 2 employees, one a faculty member who had severe hypertension, systolic blood pressures over 200, had to actually take them down to the emergency room.
Wow.
And I was thinking, these are people coming to work every day, they're in class, we have a hospital right here, to your point about resources. And so I love the fact that, this has now grown into you being proactive about saying, listen,
Absolutely.
there are things that we can be doing, not only to treat illness, but to really maintain and promote our well-being. With that in mind, what's your perspective about how students in particular see that and experience that? Because they're young, for the most part, they think of themselves as indestructible. Mm-hmm. And what do you think they're experiencing or thinking as they come into an opportunity like you're describing?
I think it's exactly that. I think youth is on their side, so they don't always think that they need to be proactive about taking care of themselves. I think that we all do a good job about taking care of others, and we're not as intentional with our own selves. And so one of the things I was sharing today is making small choices towards the larger goal. So sometimes you feel like you have to do this whole 180 and change all of who you are. You may not be able to do that, but what you can do is you can opt for a better meal today. You can opt for a different palette. You can take a yoga class. I encourage students to take the Hill on 4th Street. That will definitely get your cardio going, right? You can walk around the track. You can eat outside versus in your office. There's small things that we can do to maintain or to better assist our mental wellness. So what I encourage students to do is to find diverse ways of taking care of themselves. And so we hope that with the Bison Wellness Day, they will be able to find, okay, maybe I'm a yoga person and I really enjoy that. Or maybe I'm a planter and I want to be a plant mom or dad. Or maybe I just really need to schedule massages, whenever someone asks me if I want a gift, that's my gift. And so using that space to try different things and see what lands and add to our toolbox.
Yeah, and our philosophy obviously is we want students to come here and get the truth. We want them to go out and apply it to the service of others, but the most important person that they're going to apply that to will be themselves. And developing the holistic student who does develop good habits now, this is probably the most influential time in which we could do that. What about your experience as a student to what you see today has evolved in terms of what you've seen changed in terms of what the campus offers, what the administration has been offering, and what do you see probably as the biggest gain there, but probably the biggest opportunity?
I think the biggest gain is the more access to just world life experiences. I was so excited that Alternative Spring Break went to Ghana this year. I was excited about that. I was like, oh my gosh, they're going on the continent, right? And they're getting these students a diverse experience. And of course, we have all of our local servitude also that's happening across all of these cities and states. And so I think that is what's grown, is like the more exposure, even the Chadwick Boseman College of Fine Arts, making that into a college and having, students call it COFA, right? Having that there for them to become their hub and their home. Because we know that Howard produces the top of everything, but including entertainers and dancers and artists. And so I love that. What has changed from me being a student, I guess what are the opportunities? I want to see more involvement from our international population as it relates to just being immersed in other experiences. I love the community they have built. I think that it's necessary. And I also want to see them expand a little bit more. The same thing with our graduate professional students. I think they do such great work in their schools, in their colleges. I would love to see law and dentistry more on campus, right? And for us to merge more. And so I think those are opportunities, not only for their professional development, but for their personal development.
Yeah, absolutely, and the community benefits from that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Listen, I always close by asking, why Howard? So I'm going to pose that question to you. For the student listening, for the employee who wants to join your group, or for that faculty member who's thinking, this is where I want to spend my career? Why Howard?
I think that Howard University is the most beautiful place that you can't always describe. You can't always say the gifts, the talents, the experiences, the exposure, just all that you will gain from this sacred space. But I can guarantee you that if you come here, you'll see how beautiful she is. I think that Howard has the best of everything. I think that there's good intention behind Howard. I think there's intentionality behind Howard. And I think that the people, faculty, staff, students really do want to see her at her best and are trying every day to do that. So I say, why not Howard? I don't think that there's gonna be another place that you would go that's like her and like the Mecca. And I just encourage you to come and get your taste of it.
Excellent. Thanks for being here. My guest today was Dr. Kelechi Fluitt, Executive Director of Student Outreach and Engagement here at Howard University. I'm Dr. Wayne Frederick. Please join me next time on The Journey.
This program was produced by WHUT and made possible by contributions from viewers like you. For more information on this program or any other program, please visit our website at whut.org. Thank you.